Hello and welcome. Today we're tackling one of rock's most legendary discographies, ranking every Pink Floyd studio album from worst to best. Pink Floyd. The name alone conjures images of prisms, flying pigs, and some of the most ambitious music ever committed to vinyl. From Syd Barrett's psychedelic vision through Roger Waters's conceptual epics to David Gilmour's later work, Floyd's journey spans multiple eras and dramatic transformations. 15 studio albums, 5 decades of innovation. This isn't about commercial success or cultural impact. It's about the music itself, the ambition, the craftsmanship, and yes, sometimes the missteps. Some of these rankings will be controversial. Placing a Floyd classic lower than you'd expect doesn't mean it's bad. When you're dealing with one of rock's greatest bands, even the worst albums have moments of brilliance. So let's dive into the complete Pink Floyd studio catalog, from the experimental misfires to the undisputed masterpieces. Let's begin. At number 15, it's More, Pink Floyd's first soundtrack album, and their first without Syd Barrett. Recorded at Pi Studios in London in late January and early February 1969, the album was created for director Barbet Schroeder's film. Pink Floyd worked out most of the music in 2 weeks, with material put together quickly and semi-improvised. They timed sequences with a stopwatch due to budget constraints. This was the first album produced by Pink Floyd without Norman Smith's direct assistance. David Gilmour handled all lead vocals, marking a new era for the band. The album mixes styles awkwardly, from acoustic folk like Green is the Color to heavy rock like the Nile Song. Cymbeline remained in their live repertoire until late 1971 and is the album's strongest moment. More feels exactly like what it is, a rushed soundtrack assembled to meet a deadline, not a cohesive artistic statement. At number 14, it's Ummagumma, Pink Floyd's ambitious double album that's half live performances, half experimental solo pieces. For this ranking, we're focusing on the studio disc. The studio disc consists of solo compositions by each band member recorded at EMI Studios, giving each member one side to do whatever they wanted. This is where things get weird. Richard Wright's Sisyphus sounds like an excitable 2-year-old on a piano keyboard, while Waters' Grantchester Meadows is a pastoral acoustic piece. Waters' other track, several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pict, contains vocal and percussion effects at various speeds, forwards and backwards. Gilmour admits he went into a studio and started waffling about, tacking bits and pieces together. The studio half of Ummagumma is fascinatingly uneven, experimental self-indulgence that's more interesting as a historical curiosity than as cohesive music. At number 13, it's The Endless River, Pink Floyd's final album and a bittersweet farewell, released 20 years after The Division Bell. The album comprises mainly instrumental music, composed of material recorded during sessions for The Division Bell, 1994. Additional material was recorded in 2013 and 2014. Around 40 workable ideas emerged from the original sessions, but there wasn't time to develop them all. After Richard Wright's death in 2008, Gilmour and Mason revisited these recordings as a tribute. The album is almost entirely instrumental, with only Louder Than Words featuring vocals. In 2024, Gilmour admitted, "My mistake was being bullied by the record company to have it out as a properly paid-for Pink Floyd record. It should have been clear what it was." The Endless River is pleasant ambient Floyd, but it feels exactly like what it is, leftover studio jams, not a cohesive artistic vision. At number 12, it's Obscured by Clouds, Pink Floyd's second soundtrack for director Barbet Schroeder, recorded in the middle of the Dark Side of the Moon sessions. The band traveled to France to record the music in the last week of February 1972, with the soundtrack hastily assembled in only 2 weeks. After recording finished, the band fell out with the film company, prompting them to release it as Obscured by Clouds, rather than La Vallée. The album returns to shorter, more structured songs after the epics of Meddle. Free For became the first Pink Floyd song since See Emily Play to attract significant airplay in the US. Childhood's End was the last song with Gilmour-written lyrics until 1987. Obscured by Clouds is pleasant and professional, but clearly made under time constraints. It's a transitional work, a snapshot of a band between masterpieces. At number 11, it's A Saucerful of Secrets, Pink Floyd's most transitional album, caught between Syd Barrett's psychedelia and the band's progressive future. Recorded at EMI Studios in London from August 1967 to April 1968, this is the only non-compilation Pink Floyd album on which all 5 band members appear. Gilmour appeared on 5 songs, while Barrett contributed to 3. The title track was planned out as an architectural diagram on paper by Mason and Waters, plotted out in dynamic form before considerations as to the music itself were made. This nearly 12-minute experimental piece pointed toward Floyd's future. Waters's set the controls for the Heart of the Sun, hinted at the space rock to come, while Barrett's Jug Band Blues served as his haunting farewell. A Saucerful of Secrets is fascinating but uneven, a band caught between 2 identities, not quite comfortable in either. At number 10, it's A Momentary Lapse of Reason, Pink Floyd's first album without Roger Waters, and essentially a David Gilmour project in all but name. Recording began between November 1986 and February 1987, primarily on Gilmour's houseboat studio Astoria on the Thames, as well as studios in Los Angeles and London. The creation was marred by a bitter legal battle with Waters over the Pink Floyd name. Richard Wright returned, but only as a salaried session musician with minimal contributions. Nick Mason's contributions were also minimal, as Gilmour relied mostly on a large team of session musicians, including bassist Tony Levin and keyboardist John Caron. Gilmour experimented with songwriters and settled on Anthony Moore, who co-wrote Learning to Fly and On the Turning Away. The album spawned successful singles, but felt polished rather than passionate. Gilmour's professionalism masking the absence of Waters' conceptual edge. A Momentary Lapse of Reason is competent 80s rock with Floyd's sonic signature, but it lacks the band's former creative spark. It's professional, occasionally beautiful, but ultimately hollow. At number 9, it's The Division Bell, Pink Floyd's proper farewell album, and proof that the post-Waters era could produce something substantial. In January 1993, Gilmour, Mason, and Wright began improvising new material at the remodeled Britannia Row Studios. Recording took place at Britannia Row and Gilmour's houseboat, Astoria, with producer Bob Ezrin and engineer Andy Jackson. This time, Rick Wright was reinstated as an official member, and his presence is felt throughout. Wright performed his first lead vocal on a Pink Floyd album since The Dark Side of the Moon, on Wearing the Inside Out. Gilmour's fiancée, novelist Polly Sampson, co-wrote many lyrics dealing with themes of communication. High Hopes became an instant classic, with nostalgic lyrics and soaring guitar work. Maroon won a Grammy for Best Instrumental. The album feels warmer and more cohesive than A Momentary Lapse of Reason. Waters dismissed it as just rubbish, but the album topped charts worldwide. The Division Bell is reflective, melodic, and genuinely moving, a dignified closing statement. At number 8, it's The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, Pink Floyd's debut album, and the only full album showcasing Syd Barrett's visionary genius before his tragic decline. The album was recorded at EMI Studios in London's Abbey Road from February to May 1967 and produced by Norman Smith. It was recorded at the same time the Beatles were recording Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band Down the Hall. Partway through sessions, Barrett's growing use of LSD accompanied his increasingly debilitated mental state. The album title was derived from Chapter 7 of Kenneth Graham's The Wind in the Willows, a favorite of Barrett's. Barrett wrote all but 3 tracks, blending whimsical psychedelic pop like The Gnome with extended experimental pieces like Interstellar Overdrive and Astronomy Domini. The album reached number 6 on the UK Albums Chart and became a psychedelic touchstone, but it's also heartbreaking, a snapshot of Barrett's brilliance captured just as his mental health was collapsing. The Piper at the Gates of Dawn is essential but bittersweet, a glimpse of what might have been. At number 7, it's The Final Cut, Roger Waters' final album with Pink Floyd, and essentially his solo album in all but name. The album includes unused material from The Wall, 1979, and new material recorded throughout 1982. Recording took place at 8 different studios in England between July and December 1982. It is the only Pink Floyd album without Richard Wright, who had left under pressure from Waters after the Wall sessions. Waters dedicated it to his father, Eric Fletcher Waters, who died in World War II when Roger was 5 months old. The subtitle reads, "A Requiem for the Post-War Dream" by Roger Waters, performed by Pink Floyd. Recording was plagued by conflict. Gilmour felt many tracks were not worthy of inclusion. Mason's contributions were limited mostly to sound effects. After a final confrontation, Gilmour had his name removed from the producer credit list. The album topped UK charts, but was the band's lowest selling since Meddle. The final cut is Waters' bitter anti-war statement, powerful, but one-dimensional. It's Pink Floyd in name only, marking the end of an era. At number 6, it's Meddle, the album where Pink Floyd finally discovered their true identity after years of experimentation. Recorded between January and August 1971 at studios including Abbey Road, Air Studios, and Morgan Studios, the band arrived with no material prepared and no clear direction. They played around agreed chord structures and moods, but after several weeks, no complete songs had been created. Side 1 features the menacing One of These Days, with Nick Mason's only lead vocal, acoustic pieces like A Pillow of Winds, and the infamous Seamus, featuring a howling dog. But Side 2 belongs entirely to Echoes, 23 minutes of Pink Floyd discovering what they were truly about. Richard Wright wrote the iconic piano ping intro and chord progression, creating the ping sound by amplifying a high B note on grand piano and processing it through a Leslie rotating speaker and Binson Echo Rec unit. Wright also contributed co-lead vocals on the track. Meddle reached number 3 in the UK and set the template for The Dark Side of the Moon. Pink Floyd had finally found their voice. At number 5, it's Atom Heart Mother, Pink Floyd's most ambitious album, featuring a 23-minute orchestral suite with a cow on the cover. Released on the 2nd of October 1970, it was the band's first album to reach number 1 in the UK. It was recorded at EMI Studios, Abbey Road, in London, resulting from instrumental figures the band composed during rehearsals, including the chord progression of the main theme, which Gilmour called Theme from an Imaginary Western. Recording began with the drum and bass parts recorded in one take for the entire 23-minute suite. Waters and Mason had to play for 23 minutes straight. By March 1970, Pink Floyd felt the track needed something more and brought in Ron Geeson, an avant-garde composer. Geeson composed his score, Stripped Down to My Underpants, in his Notting Hill basement during a heatwave. The title came from a newspaper headline about a woman fitted with a plutonium-powered pacemaker. Atom Heart Mother named. The album cover, designed by Hypnosis, shows a Holstein Friesian cow with no text, a deliberate reaction against psychedelic imagery. Side 2 features shorter tracks, including the beautiful Fat Old Sun and the experimental Alan's Psychedelic Breakfast, with sound effects of roadie Alan Stiles preparing breakfast. Despite Waters and Gilmour later dismissing it, Atom Heart Mother represents Floyd at their most daring. The orchestral suite builds from gentle acoustic passages to thunderous crescendos, creating an epic journey that's genuinely moving. It's ambitious, occasionally messy, but ultimately triumphant, proof that Floyd could think bigger than anyone else. At number 4, it's Animals, Roger Waters' blistering social commentary, and perhaps Pink Floyd's darkest, most uncompromising album. Recording took place at Britannia Row between April 1976 and early 1977. Pink Floyd had bought a 3-story block of church halls at 35 Britannia Row in Islington, London, in 1975, and converted the building into a recording studio and storage facility. It was engineered by Brian Humphreys. With the exception of Dogs, co-written by Gilmour, the tracks were written by Waters. Wright later said, "Animals was a slog. It wasn't a fun record to make." But this was when Roger really started to believe that he was the sole writer for the band. Animals was the first Pink Floyd album not to contain a composer's credit for Wright. The album's concept divides humanity into 3 categories, inspired by Orwell's Animal Farm. dogs, ruthless businessmen; pigs, moral hypocrites and politicians; and sheep, the masses. The 5 tracks, bookended by the gentle acoustic Pigs on the Wing, Parts 1 and 2, contain 3 epic centerpieces: Dogs, 17 minutes, Pigs, 3 different ones, 11 minutes, and Sheep, 10 minutes. The cover, conceived by Waters and designed by Storm Thorgerson, shows an inflatable pig floating between 2 chimneys of Battersea Power Station. The photo shoot became legendary when the pig broke free and caused Heathrow Airport to divert flights. The album was released in the UK on 21st January 1977. Despite minimal radio play due to its long tracks, Animals was a commercial success. It's Floyd's most progressive album since Meddle, raw, cynical, and utterly fearless. At number 3, it's Wish You Were Here, Pink Floyd's most emotionally raw album, and a haunting meditation on absence, the music industry, and Syd Barrett. Recording began in January 1975 at Abbey Road Studios in London. Coming off the massive success of The Dark Side of the Moon, the band struggled with expectations and writer's block. The album was produced by the band themselves, with Brian Humphries as engineer. The album explores themes of absence and the music business, inspired partly by Syd Barrett's mental breakdown. The 9-part Shine On You Crazy Diamond acts as a tribute to Barrett, bookending the album. During the recording sessions for Shine On, Barrett made an unexpected visit to the studio. The band members did not recognize him at first and were deeply disturbed by his appearance. He had gained weight and shaved off his hair and eyebrows. Have a Cigar features guest vocals from Roy Harper because neither Waters nor Gilmour felt they could deliver the song's lyrics about music industry cynicism convincingly. The title track, written by Waters and Gilmour, became one of rock's most beloved songs with its simple, heartbreaking melody. The album cover, designed by Storm Thorgerson of Hypnosis, shows 2 men shaking hands while one is on fire, representing the business-like handshake that sealed a Faustian pact, and the idea of people hiding their true selves. Released on the 12th of September 1975, it topped charts in both the UK and US. Wish You Were Here is Pink Floyd at their most vulnerable, an album about loss that becomes even more poignant with Barrett's ghost literally haunting the sessions. At number 2, it's The Dark Side of the Moon, the album that stayed on the Billboard 200 for 991 weeks and became one of the best-selling albums of all time. Recording took place at Abbey Road Studios in London from May 1972 to February 1973. The album was produced by the band themselves, with staff engineer Alan Parsons, whose meticulous work helped create the album's pristine sound. The band had performed the album live extensively before recording, premiering it at the Dome in Brighton on the 20th of January 1972. The concept explores themes including conflict, greed, time, death, and mental illness, partly inspired by Barrett's breakdown. All lyrics were written by Roger Waters, with David Gilmour, Richard Wright, and the full band contributing to the music. The album features spoken word passages from interviews with people connected to the band, including roadies and doorman Jerry O'Driscoll. The iconic cover, designed by Storm Thorgerson of Hypnosis with George Hardy, shows a prism dispersing light into a spectrum, representing the band's lighting and the album's themes. Released on the 1st of March 1973 in the US, it topped charts in multiple countries and reached number 2 in the UK. Time, Money, and Us and Them showcase the band at peak creative power. The seamless flow between tracks, Claire Torrey's improvised wordless vocals on The Great Gig in the Sky, and Dick Perry's saxophone create an album that's both experimental and accessible. The Dark Side of the Moon is Pink Floyd's commercial and artistic pinnacle, a concept album that somehow became universal. At number 1, it's The Wall, Pink Floyd's magnum opus, a towering double album that became one of the best-selling records of all time. Recording took place between December 1978 and November 1979 at multiple studios, including Britannia Row in London, Super Bear and Studio Miraval in France, CBS Studios and Cherokee Studios in New York and Los Angeles. The album was produced by Bob Ezrin, David Gilmour, James Guthrie, and Roger Waters, with Ezrin's involvement helping shape Waters' sprawling concept into a cohesive narrative. The concept follows Pink, a rock star who builds a metaphorical wall to isolate himself from society. Waters based the story on his own experiences, including his father's death at Anzio in World War II, and his increasingly hostile relationship with audiences. The famous spitting incident occurred during the In the Flesh tour at Montreal's Olympic Stadium on the 6th of July 1977, when Waters spat at a disruptive fan trying to climb the barrier. Sessions were tense. Richard Wright was fired by Waters during recording due to conflicts and lack of contribution, though he completed his keyboard parts and remained a salaried session musician for the tour, ironically earning more than the band members. Gilmour fought for melodic songs like Comfortably Numb and Run Like Hell. Released on the 30th of November 1979, it spawned Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, featuring a children's choir from Islington Green School, Pink Floyd's only #1 single. The album later became a 1982 film, directed by Alan Parker. The Wall is rock opera at its most ambitious, part autobiography, part social commentary, part rock theater. It's divisive, occasionally bloated, but undeniably brilliant. At its best, it's Pink Floyd's greatest achievement. And there you have it, every Pink Floyd studio album ranked from worst to best. From experimental soundtracks and transitional works to some of the most ambitious concept albums ever created, Pink Floyd's discography is a journey through rock's most creative era. Even their worst albums contain moments of brilliance. That's the mark of a truly legendary band. If you've made it this far, you clearly share our passion for music. Hit that like button, subscribe for more rankings, and let us know in the comments, do you agree with our top spot? What's your personal favorite Pink Floyd album? Where would you rank The Final Cut or Animals? Pink Floyd's music continues to resonate decades later, a testament to their vision, ambition, and refusal to compromise. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.